Good evening. Thank you very much. It is indeed a honor and a privilege to be with each and every one of you this evening. Good to get out of the house for a little bit and talk about the issues. I want to again welcome members of Congress that are here tonight. As we sit here tonight and really talk about, I believe, things that need to be discussed in a forum, the critical issues of our nation. We watch TV all the time and we see the different networks talking about what they think is the top issue in the country right now. And I will quite frankly tell you that I believe the number one issue that we have in our nation right now is being divided. You know, during the past 3 years, our nation has been through many things. We've gone through a once in a lifetime pandemic. We've become more polarized. And we have. You think about where we were almost 3 years ago. And even before the pandemic started, there were signs of a polarization happening in our country. And it got worse during the pandemic. When we were in the midst of this, we were arguing with people over the use of a face mask. We were arguing with people over taking a vaccine. And quite honestly, those two things right there should be the person's choice. That's one of the freedoms we have in this country is choice, freedom of choice to do things. The Constitution guarantees us that right. And so it's sad that it went to that. Instead of talking about our disagreements and we take to the streets and violence. Just right after the pandemic started, we had the situation with George Floyd. And we rioted in the West Coast in Seattle. All those things happened. We could have we could have done things a whole lot more peacefuler. You think about this. There were riots in the streets. There were places burned down, and all that isn't necessary. I remember growing up as a young child, and one of my favorite things was to go to Washington D.C. And obviously, I'm still here, but one of the things I loved to do was to go by the White House, and I used to see this protester. And actually, I talked to a man just a few months ago who actually knew the man I was talking about. And this guy just sat on a bench and he banged this drum. And what he was banging this drum for was for world peace. He wasn't burning buildings down, he wasn't yelling or screaming. That's the kind of demonstrations that we need. Not this burning buildings down to the ground, not to take into the streets, fighting one another. It needs to be peaceful and lawful. For us to move forward as a nation, we must come together as a nation. My very beginning in politics, my very first convention was in 1984, the Republican Convention in Dallas. And that was the week, or the convention that President Reagan accepted the nomination of the Republican Party for a second term as president. And in the Dallas Convention Center, people were gathered, and they heard a united president talking about a United States, and not just in words, not just the United States, but really talking about how we loved our flag, we loved our country. Everyone seemed to work together for a common goal. In order to achieve the dreams and goals this nation has, we must come together as a nation. Tonight, I want to lay out for you my plan to return America to the nation it once was. As I mentioned, in the past 3 years, we have seen progress from record high unemployment of nearly 15.3% to 3.3% unemployment now. That is actually a very good improvement. Of course, the 15.3 was in the midst of the pandemic, and the entire country was shut down. We need to avoid that same situation from happening again. I've often said from this very podium that there's going to be another wave. Just like every year there is a wave of the flu, and there will be another variant of it. But we don't need to shut down our country. We don't need to shut down our economy. We've got the safeguards. We've got the vaccines in production. We've got the updates coming out, and so there is ways to avoid what happened in 2020. The first thing we will do under my administration is we will reform the unemployment system, a system that was taken advantage of during the pandemic. Recently, the Department of Labor announced there are 1.6 jobs available for every American. Think about that. For every person in this room here tonight, every person in the city here tonight, every person in the country here tonight, they could have over 1.5 jobs. Why isn't our unemployment rate lower than it is now? I've said for 3 years, my goal is a 3% unemployment rate, and we are going to achieve that under my administration. I wrote out an employment program called Enhanced Unemployment. Everyone on unemployment will have to have a minimum of 5 job interviews a week. Now, you're going to tell me that that is actually a pretty strict requirement. But I want you to think about it. You're out of work, and I was once told by my lovely wife, Andrea, I was once told that and I've been through my fair share of being laid off, furloughed. I've been through it. I was told once that my new job is to look for a job. Every American who's unemployed tonight, I challenge you to a new job. Your new job is to find a job. Under enhanced unemployment, in order to receive benefits, you must have those five interviews to continue to be qualified for continued benefits. And every able-bodied American will have a job. Every able-bodied American will have a job. Let me make that clear here tonight. When I say every able-bodied citizen, I'm not talking about our seniors. They have deserved their retirement. Well done. Thank you very much. I'm not talking about our stay-at-home parents. They have made the arrangements, and it's working for them. Who I am talking about tonight and who I'm addressing is the person who took unemployment during the pandemic and never returned to the workforce. You know, on my visits back home to Texas sometimes, I will see on the streets people begging for money. And I ask myself all the time, why aren't they working? With the 1.6 jobs available, why aren't you out there working? You know, and I believe with the enhanced unemployment program that I am going to do my best to push through Congress, I think we will see the unemployment rate lower. I really do. This must change. This whole unemployment system must change, and under my administration, it will. You know, when it comes to our nation's borders, we must protect our borders. The United States has always been a nation that welcomes people from throughout the world, but we do that through the proper methods. One of my dear friends this summer gave me a call here just down the street, and she was telling me, she was actually in Mexico, but she was telling me how she was in the car with our newest American citizen. And this person was working at a church camp, a Christian camp. And this friend of mine took her down to, I believe it was Alamogordo, to get her to actually take her citizenship test and I believe actually her oath. That's the proper way to come in this country. Not crossing the border in the dead of night, not going into people's property, but doing it the proper way. You just don't walk into the United States or walk through border areas. You know, last February I made a trip to El Paso, and visited our southernmost border. When I visited the international bridge that connects the United States with Mexico, I saw hundreds of people crossing the bridge and entering the United States. And they weren't doing that illegally, they were doing it the proper way. They weren't crossing the Rio Grande River, going to people's lands and entering the United States the improper way. We must reestablish our borders. And under my administration, that will happen. There are millions of dollars of taxpayer wall material laying in the deserts of this country. We had the contracts laid. We had the people employed. Let's finish the wall. Under my administration, we will reestablish our borders. On the world stage, we must be a protector of democracy. The United States is one of the leading democracies left in the world. As a world leader, we must do what it takes to protect democracy, and that starts at the state level. We have seen schools shuttered, now reopened, and we have seen an increased polarization in our nation. To restore our nation to greatness, we must start in our nation's schools. Since the pandemic, our nation's classrooms have become a political battlefield. It is a battlefield where our nation's kids, our students, will suffer. Under my administration, we will end that battle and return education to the classrooms. We will teach the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, and the good and bad of our history. By doing this, by just teaching what we need to teach, we can ensure that our next generation of citizens, our next generation, does not repeat the same mistakes that our generation has done. Excuse me. You know, I've had the good fortune to be married to a full-time educator, and I'm really blessed for that, for over 20 years. Andrea has served in classrooms as an elementary school teacher. She now is, on top of being a preschool instructor back in Texas, she's also a pre-K instructional lead, and I'm very proud of her. Early in our marriage, she wanted to teach summer school after teaching a full school year. She said at the time she did it for the extra pay. At the end of summer, as the fall term approached and summer school winded down, she was tired, not fully charged, ready to take on another 9 months of school. And I can tell you, for those educators out in the audience tonight, it is a grind. So how do we solve Andrea's problem and every other teacher's problem like that, a situation like Andrea's? We will increase teacher pay. Now you're going to ask me, how are you going to increase teacher pay? Isn't that a state level function? Well, it is, but we're going to provide the necessary funding in order for that to happen. We must pay our teachers a livable wage. Too many of our teachers are living on the poverty level. Some dear friends of mine are educators, and I heard a story one time of just, they're on the poverty level. These teachers work almost 80 hours a work week, almost 2 weeks worth of work in 1 week. They deserve better pay. You know, our education system should be treated like our national defense, because if you think about it, we spend trillions of dollars on the latest weapons, on the latest aircraft, and to fight the wars. Well, we have a war going on in our classrooms. We must spend the trillions of dollars in those classrooms to ensure the next generation of Americans. In order to do what I'm asking Congress to do, we must return the federal budget to the 2019 spending levels and reduce unnecessary federal programs and use the difference to fund the increases. That's how you'll get your teacher pay increases. That's how that will work. It will be a program that will be grants given back to the states to fund those increases, because for so many districts, throughout the country. First of all, they can't find enough teachers for the classrooms. That's the biggest problem the schools face right now is finding teachers for the classroom. There was, Andre had actually told me a story the other day. There's teachers being interviewed, and when they go through the second interview and they get down to what grade they're going to teach, they're like, no, thank you. One, because the pay, and secondly, it's the burden of the standardized test. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But first and foremost, we must return a true curriculum to the classroom. We must get rid of this so-called woke education that's covered this nation and return teaching the ABCs, history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. More importantly than all of this, and all of this is important, but we must return a sense of patriotism to our nation, to our classrooms. When I was in high school, I had a government teacher who was from a different political party. But during my high school years, he never once tried to push his party's agenda on his students. He taught you how government works and instilled a sense of patriotism and pride in you. My education plan, called Back to Basics, will cover a return of patriotism to the classrooms, will increase teachers' pay, and to a wage that they can live on, and support their students and families. You know, we owe it to the students in our classrooms to give them the very best possible education. We must prepare them for the future. And only way to do that is to take the politics out of the classroom. You know, that was part of the problem that we had during the pandemic. Politics got involved in the classroom in a place where it did not need to be. You know, and also, we need to return, our nation, we must return once again to learn to respect one another. We have turned against each other in oftentimes in violent ways. Like I talked about people getting mad about wearing masks, about not taking a vaccine, getting upset for the simplest things and taking it to the streets and taking it to a new level. Families throughout this country are being torn apart by senseless gun violence. And I've come to this podium time and time again and talked about mass shootings and thoughts and prayers. You know, I've come to this podium and I've given that talk way too many times. It's time for us now to pass a gun reform bill that does not infringe on constitutional rights and increase mental health spending to help get help to those who need it. Just the other day, I was asked and I was visiting a school, and I was asked by a sixth grader, "What are you going to do about guns? Are you going to take my guns away?" And that's from a sixth grader. A sixth grader in an elementary school asked me that question. Are you going to take my guns away? And quite simply, my answer was this. I will abide by the Constitution that I swear an oath to, and I have sworn an oath to. I will do everything in my power to protect the Constitution that I take an oath to protect, and I have taken an oath to protect. You know, the plan I've laid out here tonight is just a beginning to what I believe will restore the United States to the nation it once was. This last summer, I visited the Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley. It was a very special visit for me, having that being my first political campaign I ever worked on. And there's a room, a part exhibit back there, called Morning in America. And you walked in that room and you heard the famous Lee Greenwood, God Bless the USA. You saw videos of America united, America working together, not tearing each other apart. My fellow Americans, I truly, truly believe we can become that America once again. And it's my goal to see that happen. I know we can do this. If we just follow the plan that I've laid out here tonight, the elements of this plan, we can and we will return our nation to greatness. May God bless you. May God bless our troops. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you all very much. Thank you.